We'll next hear from Jill Levine from right here in Sacramento.
Yes, Jill Levine, Sacramento County Registrar of Voters, and thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to the committee. Well, this all started for our ballot on demand in a quest to find an answer. There's got to be a better way. So in 2008, if you went into our ballot room, you would see shelves and shelves of ballots because we had to pre-print each ballot because there was no other way. Of course, there was always the fear that the voter coming in, we'd run out of ballots on the shelf, or we wouldn't have the right one, or if we didn't put them in the right place, the voter would get the wrong one, and making sure we had enough for the 29 days of voting. And of course, at the end of each election, you also have to destroy all the unused the unused ballots. And using our costs from using our numbers from the primary and general elections of 2008, we destroyed 799,000 ballots at a cost of $391,000. So we had to find a better way. There was just no way we could continue just this waste. So
that 400,000 was for the destruction.
That was the
or
cost
the printing and the destruction.
The printing and destruction.
Oh, wow.
So our office had to find a better way for these ballots. So we started small. We were certified as a ballot on demand printer, and we used it for our military and our overseas voters. This was very helpful because the turnaround time from getting the ballot layout and getting it to the printer and then back to us and over to mailed out was so short that now if we're printing our own, we didn't have to worry about it. And we didn't have to rely on our printing vendor anymore. And we also printed those ballot types that just had a few voters in each precinct, and this saved us setup cost at the printer. And it also gave us a peace of mind knowing that just in case there was a new subdivision that went in or some hot contest, we would make sure we had enough ballots. So we were using our ballot on demand system more as a backup system at this point. And it was awkward because if a voter came in at the front counter and wanted to have a ballot, we would have to pull up their information on our registration system. We would take that information, we'd run it over to our ballot on demand printer, we'd have to enter that information into there, we'd have to print. The printers were slow, and it wasn't a smooth process. So we were after a much better process, and I knew that we could do it. So back to the drawing board. We had to meet with our Secretary of State, our county IT department, our election management vendor, and the ballot printing vendor to get all these connections approved. So it was April of 2010, our Secretary of State finally certified our vendor to connect to our registration system. Not our counting system, but just the registration system. And by this time, of course, our vendor had a newer and faster printers, which were also very helpful. So this is the system I envision. The voter comes in, we pull up their data, say yes, push the button, and a ballot prints for them. We go in the secure ballot printing room, we pull out their ballot and hand it to them. We now have 2 printers that do those those counter printers, and we have 3 printers that will do what we call the batch. This is for our military voters and our daily request. So using the numbers from June of 2014, we printed over 2,000 ballots for our military and overseas voters, and we were able to mail them all timely. We also now print our own test decks, our header cards, and that allows us to start our logic and accuracy testing quicker and faster. And we are not vendor dependent upon those. And adding in all those voters that came to our counter in 2014, in June we printed over 30,000 ballot cards, and in November we printed just under 50,000 ballot cards. So also in June, we thought we'd get a little adventurous, so off we went and tried our first early voting center using the ballot on demand printer. We used our county administration building because I have an in, and I was able to get a nice secure room. However, what I didn't plan on was extremely low turnout in June, and since we were starting small, we didn't do a lot of advertising. So after being open for 7 days, we actually had 33 voters. But we did have 231 drop off their ballots, so that was good. So lessons learned from this experience was you've got to educate, you have to advertise, and you have to have an election people are interested in. The ballot on demand printer, there's many benefits. It's cost effective. You only print what you need. There's no stocking of shelves. There's no ballots on the shelves in the wrong spot, which is very helpful. There is no destruction of the unused ballots. You never run out. It's the green thing to do, And it also has the ability to take the ballot printing out of the office to a location close to the voter. The Presidential Commission, in its report, said that states should expand opportunities to vote before Election Day. And testimony received by the Commission reflected the view that Americans want and expect choices in, when, and how they can vote prior to an Election Day. So at this time, if you came into Sacramento County and you wanted or needed to vote early, you'd have to either request a ballot, and we hope we get it mailed to you in time, or you would have to come to our office that is not centrally located in the county. I would like to expand these opportunities for voters, and with my current optical scan system, I can by using ballot on demand. Now, it was very awkward with our first vote center moving one of the big, large printers down to the county admin building and working with that. But the vendors are responding to this. In the last month, I've had 2 vendors come into my office with the new version. They are smaller printers. They are built into a storage cabinet, a travel cabinet, and they even have a little drawer that pulls out with the laptop, and everything is all connected into one. These smaller printers are higher technology and just as fast to print. So they are truly a system that's made to travel all in one and made to travel. I appreciate the changes that are made in the proposed changes made in to certify ballot printers on demand in your bill, SB 439. And these changes in code will help us make this vision, my vision, of having more opportunities for voters available. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll next hear from Dean Logan.
Good morning, Chairman Allen, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm Dean Logan. I'm the Registrar Recorder County Clerk for Los Angeles County. And again, I want to thank you for having this discussion. As the Registrar of Voters for the largest local government in the country, I want to start by just saying how excited I am to see that we're finally having this conversation and that the legislature is taking such an active role and placing such a high priority on voting in elections. This is something that we've been working on for quite some time in our effort to modernize the voting experience in Los Angeles County, and it's encouraging to hear the testimony today and to see where this may be going. I know that we're all very concerned with the historically low turnout that we've seen in California and in particularly in Los Angeles County. I know we're all looking for ways to address that negative trend. As we've heard today, we know that there are issues in candidates. When there are issues in candidates on the ballot, the voters care deeply about, and when they believe that their vote makes a difference, that they tend to show up regardless of place, time, and location. But we also have heard today that we as election administrators and you as legislators don't have control over the excitement or the level of candidates that appear on the ballot. So let me start by addressing what we do have some control over, and that is to remove the administrative barriers and the obstacles that get in the way of those voters who want to participate in the election when they are met with those intrinsic values that get them excited about the voting process. And that's what we've been looking at in our effort in Los Angeles County to upgrade our voting equipment, to look at not just the equipment, but to look at the overall experience, and to do that in a way that looks at it being relevant, familiar, flexible, and adaptable to voter behavior, and not so much making it adaptable to the elections regulatory framework or the very limited vendor and technology equipment that has been available in the country to date. So much is being talked about the Colorado model. I'm encouraged by the number of people from California that went out to Colorado to view the election and to view their process. I've met several times with Amber McReynolds, my counterpart in Denver, City of Denver and County of Denver. I have a couple of our team members who are going out next week for their runoff election to look closer at this as well. I think it's an exciting elections model. As was mentioned in the last panel, there are other models out there, and I think it's important that we look at those too. I think for me, what's most exciting about the Colorado model is that it most closely parallels the research and the information that we've heard in our outreach to voters as we've approached our modernization project in LA County. So it is in alignment with the principles and the values that we've been looking at. And again, that is a relevant voting experience, an intuitive voting process, something that's adaptable and flexible that over time can be improved as technology advances and as voter behavior changes. So I know as a result of that, there's a lot of momentum and excitement around this model. And I wanted to comment just briefly on some considerations or recognition that I think are important for us to look at as we move forward with that. Some of this has been stated before, so I'll try to be relatively quick on that. First of all, it's just to state that Colorado did not get to where they are overnight. It was a deliberative process. It took time, and it was informed by, again, not just legislative process and elections administration process, but by voter behavior. Their transition occurred over multiple election cycles across a span of several years. As Neil Kelly mentioned, I think their first vote center opened in 2003 in Colorado. And I'm not saying that to indicate that moving towards vote centers should take another decade. It certainly doesn't have to. We can learn from the experiences of Colorado and other states. But I think the lesson to be learned from that is that there has to be an incremental transition to the model and the deliberative process that recognizes the unique elements of where we're at in our transition in California as well. There are a lot of details that need to be looked at to be sure that we get this right, and I think it's important to emphasize that it's important that we get this right. If we're going to make this type of a fundamental change to the voting process in California, we can't afford to have missteps that then will ultimately further degrade the turnout and participation in our elections. Second point is California is not Colorado, and Los Angeles is not Denver. California has 17.7 million registered voters and 58 counties. Colorado has 3.4 million registered voters and 64 counties that are administering this process. Put that in perspective and recognize this is where sometimes I get the eye rolls, but Los Angeles County has 4.9 million registered voters. That is, in the county alone, 1.5 million more voters than the entire state of Colorado, which are served by 64 registrars rather than a single registrar of voters. Denver City County, the largest jurisdiction in the state, has 419,000 registered voters. So when we look at moving to a model such as this, and we look at the possibility of moving to distributing ballots to all of our voters by mail and setting up the vote center model, which I think, as my colleagues have said, I think is absolutely doable. We just have to recognize the impact on that. When Colorado moved to vote by mail, they were already at 70% of their voters voting by mail at that point statewide, meaning it was only about an additional 125,000 more on a statewide basis. Again, put that in perspective in Los Angeles County, where currently about 33 to 35% of our registered voters vote by mail. This means we would need to send out an additional 3.3 million vote by mail ballots. If the motor voter bill passes, we could very well be mailing out 6 million vote by mail ballots. No jurisdiction in the country has ever done that. In fact, even at our 33% total right now, Los Angeles County mails out and processes more vote by mail ballots than any other jurisdiction in the country. And there are a limited number of vendors and providers that support that system. So again, I'm not saying that to indicate that it's an impossible task. In fact, I don't think it's impossible at all. I think it's just a challenge that we have to consider, and we have to build the infrastructure and the capacity in order to meet that. Colorado also has a very robust ballot drop-off process, as you've heard, and some of that I think is based on their transportation system and their infrastructure. Those are things we need to look at closely here. The highway, the mass transit, mobility issues are important issues to be considered. The drive-by drop-off locations sound very appealing. I made somewhat of a joke to my staff that the most effective way to do that in Los Angeles County would be, instead of having drive-up locations, would be to give our California Highway Patrolmen drop-off boxes and just have them drive between the lanes of traffic during the commute period, and people could drop off their ballots at that point. Even that said, with the model introduced in Senate Bill 450, we would be looking at close to 1,000 ballot drop-off locations in Los Angeles County that would need to be checked and monitored on a regular basis. Another important consideration that you've heard already a lot about today is that Colorado has a existing and robust statewide voter registration and election management system that is really designed for the vote center model. And while we're encouraged and excited to finally be meeting the threshold in California to moving to the VoteCal system, the design of that system did not contemplate the vote center model and did not contemplate the election management functions that still remain at the local level with the 58 counties. And that's a component that will need to be built in and added on to VoteCal if we want to do this and do it right. There were comments earlier on a panel that I wanted to mention about accessibility and services to voters with disabilities, which I think is an important issue in California, and certainly in the urban area that I represent. We're working very closely with the disabled community on the equipment that we would deploy at vote centers. In fact, this week we're doing user testing on our proposed ballot marking device, and I was at a user testing session in Altadena yesterday with senior citizens. We're doing another one tomorrow at Bob Hope Patriotic Hall with disabled veterans. And I think it is important that we make sure that when we do this, that we still provide accessible locations and places where all voters have the opportunity to vote an independent ballot and with secrecy and dignity. The diversity of California, especially in LA County, also needs to be taken into account. For example, we provide election materials in 10 different languages compared to 2 languages in Denver. Questions about how we would accommodate that in terms of mailing out ballots to all voters, whether those would need to be bilingual, multilingual, or how we would receive requests from voters to ensure that they get the language that they would need to get would need to be considered as well. So all of this to say that this is going to be a transformative process for both administrators and voters alike. I'm excited about it. Again, it's a conversation we've been having in LA County, and frankly, one of the things that's been difficult in our progress in LA County has been the parallel ambiguity of the regulatory process and building a system that meets the needs of voters but still tries to accommodate what I think some of us would argue are outdated processes and regulations, and it's great that we're having this dialogue. I think cost issues are at play too. As my colleague Neil Kelly indicates, in Orange County they have some of the infrastructure already in place to do this. I do think this has the potential to significantly decrease the cost of elections, but I think it will take a while to get there, and I think it will take some upfront costs to ensure that we're not just, as we've done in the past, that we're not just jerry-rigging the old systems to try and make this new model work, but that we're actually investing in the infrastructure and the process, again, to do this and do it right. So I'm optimistic. I'm encouraged about the possibility, and I believe that it will have the end results to help us increase voter participation. I don't think it can do it alone, but I think it can be an important part of the process, and I look forward to the continued dialogue. I hope that it continues to be collaborative and that we take into account the various concerns of all jurisdictions from smallest to largest, and I think we have the opportunity here to make a real difference for California. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Allen. Honorable committee members, let me answer a question that was posed earlier. It was 31% of eligible registered voters from the November 2014 election. I think that question was posed. So, thank you again for inviting me to speak before this joint committee on elections. My name is Michael Vu, Registrar of Voters for the County of San Diego. I appreciate being given the opportunity to come before you today to speak about the concept of vote centers as an alternative to the current polling place setup, and specifically about San Diego's pilot under AB 1873. Through the leadership of Assembly Members Gonzalez and Mullen, the County of San Diego worked with their office and election advocates to pass AB 1873. This legislation paved the way for San Diego County to conduct, as a pilot, special vacancy elections under a vote center type model. In summary, every voter would be mailed a ballot and provided a prepaid postage return envelope. We would establish drop-off locations. We would set up a satellite early voting site on a Saturday and Sunday in the vacant jurisdiction. A voter education outreach plan would be established, and a number of voting protections for limited English proficient voters and people with disabilities would be established. What prompted us to propose this legislation? Instead of letting opinions get in the way of the facts, we focused on the long and current trend on how voters are casting their ballot and the reality of so many special vacancy elections being conducted throughout the state. What are these facts? As you have heard many times over, the majority of all votes cast in the 2012 presidential general election and the most recent gubernatorial general elections were mail ballots, 51% and 61% respectively. That's fact one. Fact two, over 30 special vacancy elections have been conducted in the last 6 years, 13 of them in 2013 alone, covering 21 counties. The percentage of all votes cast being mail ballots was not simply a majority or even a supermajority of voters. The average percentage of all votes cast in these elections was 79%. The total cost to counties is approximately $17.5 million. Fact three, from 2004 to today, San Diego County has experienced a 400% increase in the number of voters who have signed up to be a permanent mail ballot voter. Fact four, in the 2 San Diego special legislative vacancy elections conducted in 2013, the propensity of a voter to vote with a mail ballot was 4 to 5 times higher than a voter whose only option was to go to a polling place. And lastly, fact five, the San Diego County has been tracking the propensity of our federally covered language communities under the Voting Rights Act. In each of the past 3 general elections, there has been, on average, a 10% higher voting rate of permanent mail ballot language voters compared to the overall turnout within these respective communities. Besides these facts, a major reason for the passage of AB 1873 is because of the open dialogue we enjoyed with election groups including the ACLU, Asian American Advancing Justice, Disability Rights California, the Mexican Alliance Legal Defense and Education Fund, and the National Association of Latino Elected Officials, and others. Through these organizations, we were able to find consensus on how a more consolidated polling place environment could be realized, while acknowledging how the majority of our voters are voting and the cost impact it is having on counties. So where do we stand? Well, in the past 5 months since the law took effect, no current San Diego Congress member or state legislative members has volunteered to vacate their seat on our account. No takers yet.
We got a possibility here, maybe. All right.
So it is bittersweet to say that we have not yet had an opportunity to conduct a vacancy election under AB 1873. That said, we have been preparing ourselves on how we would execute the election should the occasion arise. Part of that is actually looking at Senate District 39, which has approximately 430,000 registered voters in it. And as my colleague Dean Logan said, is in comparison, that is essentially the size of Denver County. So let me say that under AB 1873, the administration of an election is more straightforward, but it's no small feat. So as discussions occur with expanding this concept to statewide elections, there are a number of factors to consider. Certainly, AB 1873 can be used as a starting place. The general framework to work from is there. That said, I can see how my colleagues could face challenges in implementing this on a statewide level. Even without any legislative requirement, a statewide model poses a number of issues, including many more contests being on the ballot, recruiting and training volunteers and poll workers for a duration of time, finding polling places that are accessible and proper in size to facilitate an unknown number of voters, the need for higher technology infrastructure at each site, and the unknown cost may drive away any incentive for counties to use a vote center model. If there is to be legislative stipulations in order to provide a balanced approach, which includes ensuring access to the ballot, there are three major areas that need to be hammered out before adopting a vote center option. The proper ratio of vote centers on and before Election Day, I think that's been mentioned a number of times today. The number of days early vote centers should be open in advance of Election Day, and the latitude for county election officials to establish drop-off locations, of which, as Neil mentioned, and my colleagues have mentioned earlier, many counties have already established that, these ballot drop-off locations, and in a manner that works for them, as well as in a manner that works for their voters. As it was for AB 1873, the proposal needs to make sense for all. I am confident that this legislative body, interested election groups, and election officials will be able to find consensus on these points while sending a loud message across the state and country that we are serious about an increase in voter participation and fiscal prudence in California. Passing a vote center option makes eminently good sense and has all the opportunity to be a quadruple win. It would be discouraging if we squandered it. I'm excited and supportive of the discussion to provide a vote center option to election officials and look forward to working with this body, my colleagues, and other stakeholders on it. Thank you again for this opportunity to provide testimony. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's actually really encouraging to hear all of your thoughts about various aspects of this Colorado model and the positive experiences you've had so far. Let me ask you just a couple questions. First of all, could you just give us a sense, Mr. Vu, you mentioned this briefly, but where do you see the growth in vote by mail if we don't make any changes? Where do you see, where are you now in your various counties, and then where do you see us, where would you think we'd be in 5 years?
Let me just say that in San Diego County, I'll speak for San Diego County alone, we're at currently 56% of all of our registered voters, and we have approximately 1.5 million registered voters. Of that number, 56% are considered permanent mail ballot voters. I see that number increasing. Now, of that number, let's talk about the turnout. When we talk about this past November 2014 election turnout, approximately 65% of all votes cast were mail ballots. So I see that trend only increasing, and at some point the trend line between people signing up to be a permanent mail ballot voter and the total number of registered voters are going to, it's going to peak at some point. It's going to get close, but I see ourselves being in at least 65 to 70% in the next several years.
Okay, similar stories?
I agree.
Yeah.
We are about 58, 59% all vote by mail, and it will only increase at this point. They love it.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
We're 60% between perms and one-time applications, and I really think by this upcoming presidential, we'll be close to 65.
Nevada County is considered a rural county where 71% vote by mail. I just see every election it's increasing.
Okay.
So I should just point out that as usual, LA County is the anomaly in this equation. I mean, we are currently at about 35% of our voters who are permanent vote by mail voters. I do think it's the trend line is the same. It's constantly increasing. I think there are a couple of factors that are unique to that. One is our voting system. Our vote by mail ballots are not the easiest to use from a usability standpoint, and that'll be addressed in our project. But I do think demographically that the fastest growing populations in LA County are citizens over the age of 65 and citizens between the ages of 18 and 29. We see that growth happening in the 40-plus age group, and certainly our highest propensity for vote by mail is for those over 65. I do think that there is a slower trend in the younger age group. Not to say that they won't vote by mail. I just think that's not happening as naturally as it is with the older generation.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. Questions from the senators? Other folks? Okay. I know we all need to get to caucus. Really, really appreciate this. We'll be working with each of you actually as we move forward, and want to keep hearing your feedback and thoughts as we move forward with our plans. But you've given us a lot of food for thought, and and also I think you've all, because you're on the ground, you've raised a lot of the logistical challenges of implementation that I think are very serious and do require some serious examination. So, thank you. Thank you so much. Well,
Thank you very much.
we've got 4 members of the public who'd like to come comment. 5. We're going to ask you to limit your comments to 1 minute. I apologize, but we've all got to. We're caucuses have started, so we want to be respectful of your time, but also the senator's time. So please come up for public comment. I think we've got Margaret Johnson, Nicholas Hydorn, Trudy Schaefer, and Kim Alexander, and Josh Winters. I also just want to acknowledge the presence of Joe Canciamilla, who very kindly, he's the registrar recorder, the county clerk in Contra Costa County, and very, very kindly hosted us on Tuesday when we observed the vote count process of the special election. That was very interesting, and really appreciated your feedback and comments too. So let's start with you on the left here.
Oh, your left,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. I'm Trudy Schaefer, representing the League of Women Voters of California. We're very supportive of everything we've heard today. We wanted to comment that the League has long worked both to protect the voting rights of all citizens and to encourage all citizens to vote. And what's exciting today is about these possible changes. We do want to work with the legislature and with the Secretary of State as you make your specifics of these proposals. You've heard a lot to consider, and we want to emphasize, as you've heard from others, that a basic tenet is that California is unique. We're larger, we're more complex because of our diversity than any of the models that you've heard about. And we also want to comment and reinforce the idea that Colorado has taken a number of years to phase in and learn as they've moved toward the system that we've been hearing about, and it's important to carefully work through that. We suggest that some of the details of implementation should properly be left to the regulatory process, and we recognize that even deciding what should be in regulation and what should be in statute is going to need some deliberation on your part. It's important to keep in focus the need for education and outreach to the voters. We can't emphasize that enough. And overall, we just would like to echo the call for an election and voting system that serves the needs of all Californians, regardless of their geography, whether they're metro or rural, and regardless of their special needs for language or for access for the disabled.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well, there's no disagreement here. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Josh Winters. I'm the director of the New Voters Project, and I work with CalPERG specifically in working with college students across the state, getting them engaged in the elections. I wanted to speak just very briefly on same-day registration or election day registration and what it means for youth. Just wanted to highlight that briefly. In 2008, youth voted 9 percentage points higher in states with true, I should say, election day registration, which is to say you're registered and your ballot is counted on the day of. I think that's a really important thing that should be considered into the considered in the final package. Also, wanted to mention in 2014, states with same-day voter registration, youth voted at 12 percentage points higher, and so it's consistent across the board. Of all policies that we see a major impact in underrepresented communities in the political process, youth in particular, but it's not limited to youth. It also, other underrepresented communities benefit from same-day voter registration. 7 of the top 10 states with voter turnout have it. Thank you so much. No, I made the point. No, thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Nicholas Heidorn. I'm the legislative advocate with California Common Cause. I want to echo some of the other comments you've heard here. We find that this is a very exciting reform to be looking at. We think the fact that Colorado is third in the nation in voter turnout, clearly there's some ingredients there that we can use in California and use to our benefit. At the same time, we think it's also fair to acknowledge that California is different and is unique, so we can't just take what we see in another state and transplant it here. We're going to have to think about the nuances and differences and how we apply it. And in that, it probably makes sense for California to look closely at what elements should go in regulation and what elements should go in statute, as was mentioned by Trudy. It probably makes the most sense for the legislature to establish certain baselines and then allow the rest to be able to be fine-tuned as we go forward based on implementation experience and additional research. The last thing I want to add is that California Common Cause, as part of the future of California elections and in partnership with other groups, including MALDEF, is going to be doing some additional research on things, particularly looking at how Colorado-style reforms affect things such as non-English speaking communities. We do hope to have that research done this summer, and we'll be coming back to you with what we're able to find. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yep.
Hi, Margaret Johnson, Disability Rights California. Under the Help America Vote Act, we are charged with ensuring the full participation in the electoral process for individuals with disabilities, including registering to vote, casting a vote, and accessing polling places. So this is an issue that's very important to us. I just kind of have 3 comments. As you've heard, each county is unique. We're very diverse. We want to ensure that people with disabilities are at the beginning of any discussions rather than being told what's going to happen for them. I think others have mentioned that. Secondly, we think that vote centers, when you're looking at those, you need to look at each county. What might work for LA County is not necessarily going to vote for a more rural county. And then finally, there are voters with disabilities who can't use paper ballots but would probably like to vote at home, and we might suggest looking into technology that would allow them to get ballots through email that they could then use their screen readers to read, and they would be able to then complete them online, print them, and either mail them or drop them off like every other voter. So we just encourage looking at different options for people and involving us early.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, that message is loud and clear. And I feel compliment you on the best hair of the entire proceeding this morning.
you.
All right. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Allen. Kim Alexander with the California Voter Foundation. I want to agree with the comments that were made before and add a comment that really hasn't come up today, which is that the bill currently contemplated for your consideration is an opt-in bill. It's not a requirement that everybody would be mailed a ballot. The idea is that counties would be given the option to adopt this wholesale change. And I would put forward that that is not the Colorado model. The Colorado model is a system where it's working statewide the same way for everybody, and everybody's operating under the same rules, the same procedures, the same voting opportunities. This doesn't mean that you have vote centers in every county that are exactly the same or open the same amount of time. Colorado came up with a tiered system for their counties based on their population size, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. If you're in a large county, you have to provide more drop boxes, more voting centers. If you're in a smaller county, a rural county, there are allowances made for you. So I would like to see something similar where there is some consistency and predictability in the system statewide so that it's not a pick and choose situation like we have now. We're working on some bills to try to make improvements to the vote by mail process. I passed around the executive summary from our report from last summer, And these bills, while they'll make improvements, one is SB 365. This would provide for drop boxes in California statute. But again, it's permissive as a way to avoid having the mandates problem. So we
Right.
really have to get back to the funding issue
comprehensive.
and crack that nut so that
Yeah.
we can do what Dean Logan was saying and not just jerry-rig
I know.
the current system, but have a wholesale reform that's going to make something better that we know is going to save money in the long run. So let's not beat around the bush, deal with the funding issues head on,
Yeah.
and provide the funding that the counties need.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you. Thank you, Ms. Alexander, and couldn't agree more. We're under some constraints, though, of course, if this is part of a broader comprehensive package that we can get everyone behind, maybe we'll be able to get to what you're talking about. And I'd love you to keep talking to staff and working with us on that. Well, really appreciate, really wonderful thoughts, and I learned a lot, and look forward to kind of talking more with my fellow senators and members of the Assembly Committee as well to see where we're going to move with this. But please do stay involved. Every comment was spot on, and just appreciate everyone's engagement. So this is a process that's moving forward with a lot of excitement, but also with some trepidation in areas that we need to continue to work on and look at. So thank you so much, everyone, and we'll now get to caucus. Thank you.